Hey guys, Youngblood with you with an update on the Crusader Ares ship now that we have a Q&A post from CIG. Now, first off, this was released about 6 days ago, so my apologies on the delay, but you know, a newborn and Christmas and all the holidays and everything are going to do that a little bit. So there have been several times where these types of posts from CIG come out, and I just kind of say, like, you know, damn, we didn't really get the information that we needed. But this was a better set of answers than we've had before. So without much ado, let's go ahead and jump into the information that we did get. When asked about the flight model and if this would be closer to a Saber, a Hornet, or a Vanguard, the answer was that it was going to be closer to the Vanguard or the Freelancer. And that's important because what it means is that there's some balance here. If you strapped a size 7 gun to a ship with Saber-like maneuverability, or hell, even a Hornet, you would basically be able to keep that gun on target of just about anything, and that spells an OP balancing nightmare. Now, with it being closer to a Freelancer and maneuvering and really being locked in with the fixed weapons, it definitely means that the fighters are going to be a real problem for this ship. Now, I will say that as a pretty frequent Freelancer mispilot, smaller fighters aren't always a problem, but the mantises with the gimbals are what's making all of the difference there. So if I envision using one fixed weapon and trying to land shots against something like an arrow, I have a really hard time seeing this as being super effective. So this becomes a bit more of a niche ship and really pulling it at intelligent times. Now, speaking of balance, the question I brought up as well was in regards to the DPS of one size 7 weapon versus something like a Vanguard, which can go up to a max size 5 and 4 size 2s on the nose, and where that all lands from balance. Now, the DPS is pretty close to breaking even there, so the question is asked, what makes this ship a better option? Now, their answer was pretty good, because it starts to talk a little bit more about advanced damage, such as penetration. So once armor is implemented into the game, larger ships are going to be able to not worry about some of the smaller rounds. So something like a Super Hornet carrying 5 Scorpions may not be able to actually penetrate something like an Idris's hull, but a size 7 round has more mass and can penetrate and actually start doing component damage. Now, what that means is that a Vanguard is probably going to be a better overall option for multi-purpose combat because you can deal with fighters a little bit more effectively. But if you're specifically targeting larger ships, I would say things like Freelancer, Cutlass, and above, the larger weapon is going to eventually have an advantage. Now, the other advantage of larger weapons is increased range, and the expected current range on the Inferno's Gatling is about 8 kilometers, which is really significant considering that the smaller weapons on those ships, like the size 4s on the Hammerhead, for example, are not going to be able to reach you while you can reach them. Now, that's really starting to mix and match ranges, things like penetration values and fighter escorts, and we really kind of start to see some advanced rock, paper, scissors gameplay coming into the fray. Additionally, the brochure alluded to some long-range ability, and they clarified that this doesn't really have anything to do with the ship having interior living space or the ship being like long range from like a component perspective, but again, it's in relation to the range on these larger weapons, allowing you to engage from further out. I think that's kind of poor phrasing, but their answer makes sense. Now, there was also an image in the video about the Ares which showed 2 smaller guns, so it was asked, you know, where did that come from? But that was really from earlier concepts, so we really are truly locked to the 2 guns on the Inferno, being the size 7 laser or the size 7 Gatling repeater. Now, in the same area of questioning, you only have 1 weapon. So how much ammo can the Inferno actually carry? And that's important. And the answer is that it carries additional storage for rounds. So you're basically going to have 2 to 3 times the average ammo capacity on a ship with Gatling weapons. So that's good to hear as well. Now, as expected, we also get the confirmation that the weapons cannot be swapped. So you're basically looking at these 2 bespoke weapons for these 2 specific hulls. Now, balancing between these variants, we know the Inferno has additional armor, but does sacrifice the additional shield generator that the Ion gets because of the additional power plant. You also don't need that ammo storage we already talked about. Now, the armor on the Inferno is said to be significantly more effective, and while the armor won't be in the game yet, the short-term answer for them is to give the Inferno a larger hull HP value. Though eventually, once we get the armor into the game, we're going to have the ability to shrug off some of those smaller rounds instead of just being able to absorb more damage. The Ion will actually have a relatively weak hull compared to the Inferno, and that's because you do have the components, the additional components that are taking up space, but also more importantly taking up weight, because they are going to have the same flight model, so there needs to be the difference in the mass for that armor. Now, this ship was called a capital ship killer, which I thought was really poor phrasing in an advertisement type of stance in the brochure, which I understand because they're trying to make these brochures feel like they're actually coming from a manufacturer in a real-world sales pitch. But I don't like it when they do this for ship sales. This ship is not going to be able to solo a capital ship. It's just not going to kill other capital ships without other support. So the question was asked about how many Ares it would take to drop a capital class shield. And their answer was it depends on the cap ship that's involved. You know, a Javelin is not the same thing as an 890. So the short answer, though, is that a single Ares isn't killing a capital ship, which I mentioned in the Should You Buy video. I just don't think that's going to happen, and they confirm that. They do say, though, that it's a good ship to bring when you're trying to bring a capital ship down, or when you're using it in conjunction with other ships, or maybe like a wing of Ares. Someone asked a great question, though, about if they can have the typical brrr sound that we get, like out of an A-10 Warthog, specifically for the Inferno with a Gatling gun. They did say they would try, but the reason that ship makes that sound in real life is the speed of the rate of fire as well as the size of the round that's being used. The Inferno's main weapon is going to have a slower fire rate than the A-10's weapon, so it's not going to sound the same. I almost expect it to sound a little bit like a freight train. The final question that was asked was in regards to a claim made in the brochure about the Ares being able to be scrambled from a carrier or from a base, and that obviously led to the question we get every time about what ship does this actually fit in. They go on to say that it'll fit fine on a Kraken, but it's not expected to fit in an Idris, a Polaris, or an 890. I find that kind of hard to believe, especially based on the measurements that we've seen, and I'd be a little bit disappointed if the Kraken was the only thing capable of carrying this. But I also do know that I've seen some very creative landing that's been allowing unintended ships to fit in others, so I'm not going to be too disappointed just yet, but I'm going to wait for more and kind of see how that all plays out. So again, that's the information we got, and again, I feel it was really good information to have, so bravo to CIG for a good Q&A, and also for the players that actually upvoted relevant questions this time. I will keep you posted on the ships as they come out, because I'm really interested, not only in the ship because I have both of them, but also in the balancing and how it all plays out. If you have questions, please get them in the comments. Otherwise, I appreciate y'all watching. Stay tuned for a lot more coming soon, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.